It's difficult to be truthful about what you think, what you feel, and who you are if the laws are set up to eliminate a lot of the cross language that creates problems, but you can't actually be honest and truthful about certain things.
As the creator of Ovambo, an award-winning African trade tech company, how would you describe culturally attuned technologies?
Megan, thanks. It's a great question. And I like the way you asked it, because people will start out by saying, why is it necessary? It's important because if you're in Europe, for example, you would not use a German risk model or a credit model to go and measure somebody's creditworthiness in Cyprus. For the African market, which is one of the hugest growing frontier emerging market, there isn't that much of a delineation or a specificity around how data is used from one group to the next. The question came about, and the need to be culturally attuned, when we realized partnering with microfinance, for example, they didn't have any risk model other than it's 2% per month, but based on what criteria? So there was a huge opportunity to begin to look at the business profile of Africans from a genomic standpoint. Why is one group more successful than another? Why is it that when Igbos in Nigeria travel anywhere on the continent, they set up these very good businesses? What can we draw from them in the fourth industrial revolution to say these digital footprints or this digital characteristic can be replicated or embedded into a financial inclusion model to get similar results? The same with Bamilikes in Cameroon or Kikuyus in Kenya. And some of your listeners may not even know these groups. They look at Africans as one large group. No, we're talking about a continent with more than 2,000 languages, which is one of the reasons why being culturally attuned meant that we created chatbots in those languages so that people in their most authentic selves can qualify better for financial support, and we can understand the continent better.
So would you say there are business and financial benefits to the businesses themselves who are tailoring their strategies to different cultures?
Yes, there most definitely is. I think that it creates a better, longer runway to go from small or micro to small to medium to large. It gives an authenticity to the business ecosystem, because the ecosystem sometimes sits separately from the entrepreneur or the business. And within the African continent context, especially within trade, individuals are companies. They're sole traders. They're working as themselves, especially for women. And in a world where the gender lens has become way more important than it ever was before, understanding why a woman in a cultural area where marriage is set up in a particular way, why is there not a pathway that defines the world for her exactly the way she is? Africans often have to step outside of authenticity and do what we call code switching in order to operate globally and then become something else when they return across the border. That is not a successful way to live as a human being. And there should be a way in which finance, trade, digital enablement can create a better human being, a life experience. And it de-risks the continent too.
How has the digital revolution improved the financial industry's understanding of diverse cultures?
Wow. It just keeps on passing it down into finer and finer elements, to the point that I think we will move away from having conversations about market segment and have AI that can specifically pick the human being and what they need and want, both in the present and in the future, or match them up to services on a self-serve basis that is truly intuitive. And I don't think that we will notice the difference between a digital engagement and an analog human-to-human engagement. It will all be a case of how the more you get involved in these systems and the more educated as a consumer you are, the more savvy you'll become. When you have an educated consumer, you've got better growth, even during these pits and troughs, as we've seen with things like COVID or whatever next pandemic is coming, and it will come along. But I think that it's difficult to divide the two. They belong in the same place.
With a passion for inclusion, what more needs to be done to tackle discrimination in the workplace?
I think the first thing we need to do, and it's a dangerous thing, because it's what caused the problem in the first place, is to get rid of PC language. It's very difficult, and this goes right back to cultural authenticity in finance. It's difficult to be truthful about what you think, what you feel, and who you are if the laws are set up to eliminate a lot of the cross language that creates problems, but you can't actually be honest and truthful about certain things. The way questions are asked on application forms can lead, even in an AI system, down the wrong path. Financial inclusion and inclusion in the workplace needs to start with an environment for honesty, without the penalty of being judged for it. So if, let's say, somebody is queer, but you're working in an organization that may have some either financial tithing to a religious group or whatever the case may be, unfortunately, you could find yourself iced out from those kind of job roles. But there needs to be a way in which your performance is good enough and not who you are and what you think. I'll give you an example. Many years ago, in Aldershot, I went for a job interview. No, it was Swindon, actually. And I had been unemployed for a while. This was in the 80s. I was one of the 2 people who was offered the job. And as I was signing the documentation, the owner of the company, which sold peripherals and disaster recovery, said, "I don't like your kind." And I was shocked. I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "I don't like Black people." And I asked him, "Well, why are you telling me this? You've offered me the job." He said, "Because I want the best person for the job. But I don't want your performance affected when I don't ask you how your weekend is or how you're doing as a person. And I'm letting you know this up front to give you the choice if you still want to work for me." I thought 10 seconds and I thought, I can do this. It was one of the best work relationships I ever had. It made me very resilient. Now, there will be some in today's world of PC, they'll say, "Well, that's terrible." Yeah, but you know what? It's his business. He's free to think what he wants. I don't necessarily have to engage with him. And he's not the greatest, most positive role model in a world where gender and inclusion, some good 30 years later, that's important. But because I've had that experience, I know what it means to work in a difficult place and still make it work for me. I also realized as a Black female that the success of my role with him means that maybe other Black people will get employed. Whether he likes him or not is almost irrelevant. Is he a fair employer? And yes, he was. I learned a lot. I was respected and I was cared about. This is not a popular way to view this, but I have to ask the selfish question. Did it work for me? Yes, it did. Does it tell me what not to do as an employer? Yes, it does. So that I've extracted some value from that bad experience. And so when it comes to the workplace, inclusion and fairness comes in so many different packages, so many. It's up to you to decide how to pull that value or walk away.